I found the one fasting approach that actually shrinks belly fat by 33%, more than almost any other diet. And if you've been intermittent fasting for months with stubborn belly fat that just won't budge, this could be exactly why. But before we get into this, if you like this kind of content, do me a solid, do the channel a solid, and hit the like button. It really helps YouTube's algorithm push this content out to those that might need it the most. So thanks in advance. Now, let's get back to this useful information here. So here's what's happening to most people. You read about intermittent fasting benefits: fat loss, better insulin sensitivity, reduced inflammation. It sounds perfect, right? So you start a fasting method. Could be a 16-8, could be OMAD. You're consistent, you track your eating windows, but a few months pass and your visceral belly fat is still hanging on, leaving you with a belly that just won't budge. You might lose weight on the scale, but that dangerous fat that sits around your organs, that fat that's still showing up at your belly, is still hanging on. You start thinking, is intermittent fasting just hype? And I know firsthand about this because a buddy and I started with intermittent fasting over 20 years ago. And honestly, I was in my 20s when we started, and I'm 56, so it's further than that. Right before it became an internet hype. We started with a notepad and a digital calculator. No digital calorie counters, no special food tracking apps, straight old school. So I know if the results you expected aren't happening, it's natural to wonder if it's worth the effort at all. Because some of these diets are really, really challenging to maintain in your everyday life. But here's the thing. The problem usually isn't intermittent fasting itself. It's that you're missing the one key component that makes it work for all that visceral fat. For instance, a groundbreaking study, 2023 was when it was published in the Journal of Obesity, tracked this exact same problem. They followed 41 people with obesity for 8 weeks. Same calorie intake, same exercise levels, same timeline. But they split them into two different groups. Group one did standard heart-healthy caloric restriction, the typical eat less, move more approach. Group two did intermittent fasting plus one additional component. And here's what they found. The caloric restriction group lost 14% of their visceral fat, which is not bad at all, right? But the intermittent fasting group, plus this added component, they lost 33% of their visceral fat. That's more than double the visceral fat from the same caloric deficit, same calories in, same calories out, but completely different results right where it mattered the most, where that dangerous belly fat surrounds all of your organs. So what was this one additional key component that made group one so much more effective at targeting visceral belly fat? The answer? Protein pacing. You've probably never heard of this before, and it doesn't surprise me because nobody really talks about it. Most IF content focuses on when to eat, but completely ignores how really to structure your meals, or at least structure the protein intake during your eating windows. But here's what protein pacing actually is and why it's a game changer for visceral fat. Instead of getting all of your protein in on 1 or 2 big meals during your eating window, you distribute 20 to 40 grams of protein evenly across maybe 4 small meals during that eating window. So if you're doing the 16-8 method, instead of having 2 massive 800 calorie meals, you're having 4 400 calorie meals, each with substantial protein. Now, why does this work so much better for visceral fat? There's a few different things. The first one is protein has the highest thermogenic effect of all the macronutrients. Your body burns about 30% of protein calories just digesting and processing it. When you spread this protein intake across that window, you're keeping your metabolic fireplace burning higher for a longer period of time. Second, and this is crucial, visceral fat behaves differently than the fat under the skin, which is the subcutaneous fat. It's more metabolically active, which means when you get your nutrition timing right, like maintaining stable blood sugars and proper protein distribution, visceral fat responds faster and is usually the first fat your body releases. When you pace your protein correctly, you're giving your body steady amino acid availability without the massive insulin spikes that can actually promote visceral fat storage. We don't want that. But wait, there's a third component that most people completely ignore, and it could be sabotaging your results this very minute. Most people treat intermittent fasting like it's just about timing. They focus entirely on their fasting window and their eating window, but they completely ignore what's happening during the fast itself. But here's what the research actually shows about optimizing the fasting state itself. There was a 2021 study from the University of Sydney where they found something remarkable about visceral fat during fasting. When researchers tracked what happened to different fat depots during your every other day fasting routine, they discovered that visceral fat actually goes into what they call preservation mode. Unlike subcutaneous fat, which releases fatty acids readily during a fasting state, visceral fat became resistant to releasing its stored energy. It adapted to protect itself and the body. The researchers noted that during repeated fasting bouts, visceral fat adapted by holding on to the fat. And it did this to protect you, to protect us, and protect the energy storage. It thinks we're starving. This explains why so many people plateau with basic intermittent fasting. Your body gets smart. It learns to protect visceral fat because it thinks you're in a starvation mode. But here's where protein pacing changes everything about that. When you're breaking your fast with proper spaced out protein meals, you're sending completely different signals to your body. You're saying we have abundant amino acids available, and you're telling the body you're not going to lose muscle, so start burning fat, and it's safe to release that stored fat. This prevents that adaptation response that kills your progress. Number 4, this is the fourth component that's really interesting, and it's where most people miss the biggest opportunity. That same 2023 study didn't just track fat loss, they tracked what happened to lean muscle mass. That standard caloric restriction group lost muscle as well as fat, which actually slows your metabolism over a period of time. But the intermittent fasting plus protein pacing group, they gained lean muscle mass while losing visceral fat. Their body composition completely transformed. This is huge because muscle tissue is metabolically active. So not only are you losing dangerous visceral fat faster, you're building the metabolic machinery to keep it off. And why does this combination work so well? It's because intermittent fasting creates a hormonal environment that primes both your fat burning and muscle building progress. Your growth hormones, they end up spiking during a fasted state. Your insulin sensitivity ends up improving, and your cellular autophagy kicks into high gear. Then when you break your fast with proper protein pacing, you're providing the building blocks that your muscles actually need for that protein synthesis right when the body is most receptive to use them. So here's the protocol that actually works based on what the successful studies did. First, your fasting schedule. Start with 16-8 if you're new to this. Fast for 16 hours, eat within an 8-hour window. The study used a more aggressive approach, but 16-8 lets you apply the same principle more sustainably. Second, protein pacing during your eating window. Aim for 4 meals filled with 20 to 40 grams of protein, high quality protein. If your eating window is 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., you might eat at 12 p.m., 2:30 p.m., 5 p.m., and maybe 7:30 p.m. Think eggs, Greek yogurt, lean meats, or quality protein powder. Third, total protein target. Aim for 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight daily. So if you weigh, let's say 180 pounds, your target is right around 144 to 180 grams of protein spread across those 4 meals, and try to be as even as possible. Fourth, meal consumption. Each meal should be roughly maybe 25% protein, 25% healthy fats, and 50% low glycemic carbs or vegetables. Fifth, consistency. Give this protocol at least 8 to 12 weeks. The study showed results at 8 weeks, but visceral fat can be real stubborn. Keep in mind, your body needs time to adapt and feel safe in knowing it's okay that it releases this stored energy. 6, and this is crucial, don't just focus on the scale. Visceral fat shows up in measurements and how your clothes fit long before it shows up on the scale, especially if you're building muscle and losing weight at the same time. During your fasting window, stick with water, maybe black coffee or plain tea. Even a small amount of nutrition, whether it's protein or anything else, can break the hormonal benefits of fasting. Save all of your nutrition for your eating window. And let's be clear about expectations here. It's not going to melt away decades of visceral fat that you've acquired in just a few weeks. But what the research shows is pretty promising. This approach targets visceral belly fat specifically rather than your overall weight. Now, for those of you in your 40s and beyond, like myself, this becomes even more important. Your natural hormone production is declining. Your insulin sensitivity is typically decreasing as we age. These things just happen. But those of us pushing 40 and beyond often need a more targeted approach to see meaningful visceral fat reduction. When done correctly, you should start noticing changes with better energy, less bloating, and your clothes fitting differently around the waist within, I'd say, 3 to 4 weeks. But the more significant visceral belly fat reduction typically shows up around 6 to 8 weeks. The truth is, most people are doing a watered down version of intermittent fasting that only scratches the surface of all of its possibilities. The protein pacing piece can make all the difference in the world if you're not making progress right now. So try to switch it up. When you combine proper fasting windows with this strategic protein distribution, you're finally addressing visceral fat the way it needs to be addressed. So what's been your experience with intermittent fasting and stubborn belly fat? What's worked best for you? Leave us a comment down below, and I'll see you guys next time.